What's up, you guys? Welcome to another video. There's a lot of drama right now with Pam Bondi, the Epstein files, Kash Patel. Who knows if we're ever even going to see this stuff. But I came across this video. It was on the Benny Johnson show this weekend, and he had an anti-human trafficking expert on his show. And this guy just blew my mind. If you hadn't seen this already, you've got to check this out. I'm not going to waste any time. We're just going to get right into it. But listen to what this guy has to say.
Honor to have you on, Tiago. Thank you for joining us to maybe shed some light on what was happening here with Jeffrey Epstein and why this operation is being so protected right now. An enormous amount of energy is being used to protect what was happening with Jeffrey Epstein. And in all these years, and in this social media landscape where there are no more secrets, this seems to be possibly one of the biggest secrets kept. You have so much knowledge about this industry and the darkness and sickness of it. Could you educate us, elucidate for us what's happening here?
Yeah, Benny, thank you for having me on. What an honor. And it's been just phenomenal to watch your career skyrocket because you're a voice for truth. I cannot honor you enough, Benny. You and your team are doing the greatest work on this subject in the media. There's none better. So thank you very much. There's been decades when we've asked, this is my 30th year in the fight against child sex trafficking, of course, because my sister was trafficked in Lanka for 6 years. It took us 6 years to rescue her. And she was sold to men like Jeffrey Epstein, to executive Fortune 100, Fortune 500 company executives. What if, Benny, and by the way, Kyle, your two previous guests are heroes of this nation. That is America's finest in law enforcement right there. They understand what is at stake. This is a battle of light and dark. It's the most contentious battle between Satan and God, is the innocence of children. But what if I told you the powers that control the FBI, because my job is to do gap analysis every day to find out what are predators doing that we don't yet know. And Benny, this crime changes every 10 days. It is so volatile. There's so many mechanisms. We are so far behind the 8 ball. What if I told you that the FBI and those who are protecting what we think is Jeffrey Epstein files are actually protecting Wall Street? What if I told you that the power here that's being protected is in fact not even Jeffrey Epstein or the Hollywood Tinseltown names to your previous guest account? We have the lists of the Hollywood names. We know who were on the flight logs. We know the pilots that flew the planes. We know they've never been subpoenaed. They've never been cross-examined in front of a jury of their peers. It will do nothing. Who's being protected here, Benny, is Wall Street. Do you know that as you and I sit here, we're trading on Wall Street stock in companies that own strip clubs that traffic children today in America? Rick's Cabaret is owned by a conglomerate media company, look it up, that's traded on the stock exchange. You're talking about when this cookie really crumbles and the names actually comes out. Tax evasion, tax fraud, which is a ultra egregious crime in this country. People are going to lose their livelihoods. People are investing in stock that cause human beings to be traded like cattle in this country. This is run by Wall Street and K Street. The lobby, the Free Speech Coalition that just combated us in the Supreme Court 2 weeks ago, that said children should have access to porn, when we're saying there should be age verification, that's driven by Wall Street. This thing runs into the coffers of America. This is the system that has bought votes in Congress, votes in the Senate, both sides of the aisle. Money talks. The root of all evil, according to the Word of God, is the love of money. When you couple money with sexual perversion, you've got a cocktail that Adolf Hitler and Fritz Belusek, a pedophile under Hitler, made their mandate to groom and prepare a guy named Alfred Kinsey, and said, we will break America's youth sexually. We will sexualize children. Kinsey goes and performs 24-hour around-the-clock experiments, pedophilia on boys 6 weeks old. Kinsey helped write the sex offense section in the model penal code that still exists today. The very model penal code that Pam Bondi wants to execute was written by a pedophile, funded by U.S. presidents. Now you need to talk George Bush. You need to talk Bill Clinton. You need to talk Barack Obama. This thing goes to Wall Street, Benny. This is why you can't get Section 230 repealed and replaced. Because if it really crumbles and the names really come out, and your two previous guests are right, the names do nothing. We need to see subpoenas. We need to see warrants. We want to see perp walks. You're going to hear names that Americans don't know about hedge fund managers, venture capital firms, private equity internationally. This thing at the root of it, Benny, cuts so deep that heads will roll in Congress, in the Senate, in state houses. They buy votes. You understand that most of these men were invited, and women, to a party. Take Sean Combs, for instance, P. Diddy. You say, was Epstein an informant? Yes, Sean Combs was an informant. But remember, just for a minute, Jeffrey Epstein couldn't run what's called a book. On Wall Street, you run what's called a book of business. That's the amount of money you manage as a money manager within a venture capital firm or a hedge fund, your book. Epstein couldn't run a book in a bunch of lemonade stands. He had no books. They built a book for him. Who built the book? Robert Maxwell built the book. Jeffrey actually worked for Ghislaine and for Ghislaine's father. Jeffrey was a target. They made him. They brought Wall Street around him. They built him a book. Why did they build him a book? They built a book around him to manage money, to compromise Wall Street, to get dirt on Wall Street, to bring Wall Street to a party, to surreptitiously film big money managers. They're going to knock on the door with a yellow manila envelope with a photograph of a minor being in a sex act behind him, and he's compromised. And their family is on the block. This is, if you really want to take a scalpel and cut this thing and cut the cancer out of America, you need to start talking about human trafficking in the same sentence as you're talking about Wall Street and K Street.
This is absolutely fascinating. I have to dive in on what you just said about the building of the book. A question that we have regularly asked, that often gets asked: how did Epstein get all of his money? He didn't really provide any services. He didn't seem particularly good. He didn't graduate college or anything. He just went and worked for Bill Barr's dad randomly without any degree at all. Can you please explain that operation? And importantly, Epstein working for Ghislaine, not the other way around.
Yes. And people will say, Yaffer, come on. No. Robert Maxwell introduced Ghislaine to Jeffrey. Jeffrey was a target. Just like I told you, Alfred Kinsey was a target for Fritz Berlusconi. Do you know that Alfred Kinsey made Hugh Hefner? Alfred Kinsey groomed and made Hugh Hefner. Hugh Hefner became a target. The Love is Love movement of the 60s, the sexual obscenity statutes in 1970 and 71. These things don't just happen. Epstein was a target. He was made. They built this book around him. Let's make it real for Americans. They go, yeah, okay, that's a little far-fetched. No. How does Hunter Biden send over $4 billion from Burisma? He's not a money manager. They build a book around him. They build trust and money. Now you need to go very deep into securities, and you need to go deep into international trade. They attracted money to Jeffrey. They positioned Jeffrey. Yes, he was an intelligence agent, and it's an intelligence agency, the FBI, and they do not answer to the president. They should. They answer to Wall Street. They answer to Wall Street. Why is the cases in New York? Ghislaine Maxwell was in France and in Israel. Why is she taken to New York? Why is she not taken to Dallas, Texas? Why is she not taken to Washington, D.C.? Why was Jeffrey Epstein in New York? Because Wall Street controls this cabal. This is a para-government system that is the World Economic Forum. So they built a book around Jeffrey. What does that mean? They attract business. They bring people to agree to put money in a pool. Jeffrey is literally put in position. You now manage the money. You're not really managing the money. You're managing assets. These people are assets. Now you're talking about families, wealthy families that diversified their investment portfolio. And all of a sudden they've got a third, 15% of their portfolio is now embedded. Why did they go to Donald Trump? They went to Donald Trump because, and you did a beautiful job yesterday. The best I've ever heard on Alex Acosta. No one ever wanted to talk about Alex Acosta. You did a phenomenal job. I listened yesterday on Trump being the only New York billionaire that played ball, that said, hey, I'll tell you guys what I know. The only one. And not just in 2019, like you reported, in 2007. He helped in 2007. The Jeffrey Epstein case, all the data we have now, we had it in 2007. Nothing's new. Go look at the length of the case. Why haven't you seen new evidence from 2015, 2016? He was trafficking kids until he went to prison. There's nothing about 15, 16, 17. Talking about Ghislaine Maxwell. Ghislaine controlled Epstein. Epstein did not control Ghislaine. In the trafficking world, here are your players. You have a trafficker, then you have two bottom girls that are the handlers that normally get arrested. There's an arm's length between them and the trafficker. They recruit the girls. They're the madams. They normally go and coerce them and recruit them, right? And then you have the one making the sale, and then you have a buyer. Why have we never talked about the buyers? Why do you know what we call the Johns? Why do nobody talk about who bought? If Epstein was a trafficker and Ghislaine was a trafficker and they sold children, then you sell a good to a buyer. The buyer's Wall Street. The buyers is American men that are very influential. That's who's buying. Ghislaine ran.
Tell me what you guys think in the comments. This makes complete sense to me. I don't know anything other to say than that. But the way that this guy is breaking this down, and keep in mind, his sister was a victim of sex trafficking. And this guy's devoted 30 years of his life to investigating this entire process. And this is what this guy's talking about. It's blowing my mind.
Jeffrey, Ghislaine reported up to foreign intelligence agents, getting information on American sitting House and Congress members and money on Wall Street, and reported it out of the country and controlled Wall Street from the outside. Jeffrey was as much an agent for the outside through Ghislaine as he was to the inside. Within a normal structure where Ghislaine works for Jeffrey, Jeffrey does not get arrested before Ghislaine. The bottom girl gets arrested first every single time. They take the fall. Like Harvey Weinstein took the fall for Hollywood Elite. Like Roger Ayers took the fall. No, Epstein goes down first because he actually worked for Ghislaine, who worked for her father. Remember, her father was found floating upside down in the ocean off his yacht. Go look at what he was doing at the time. He was going against Wall Street. This is a Wall Street issue, Benny.
Wow. So what you would presumably see inside of these actual documents would be bankers, hedge fund managers, JP Morgan.
Yes.
You would see the control of America's financial system. And if you control America's financial system, well, then there's every politician in your pocket.
Well, Benny, what if I tell you you can't legally bank marijuana in the U.S., and you shouldn't, right? Boulder, Colorado, they legalized marijuana, THC level of no matter what. You can't legally bank. It's a duffel bag cash system, but you can legally bank the sale of children in this country. The money is flowing through our financial systems. Why have you've seen Zuckerberg, Marsha Blackburn, amazing, Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz in the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. They call Jason Citron from Disport. They call Zuckerberg in front of Congress. Why haven't you seen the heads of JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Chase, Wells Fargo, HSBC, Royal Bank of London. Why didn't you see bankers and hedge fund managers? Why isn't Wall Street being called? They're banking it. It's a $1 trillion industry. $152 billion a year are spent inside America selling women and children for sex. Tax-free. It's tax fraud. It's banked through the banking system. Yet, no bankers are being called to the carpet because it will rock the financial system.
And you'd have total financial collapse, and there's no politician that would ever want that, yes?
Because they're funded by the same families. Now, am I saying that every family that's invested in the stock exchange understands that there's a fraction of their investment that's held in some sort of a fund that they don't know, and that's the issue. The general FBI agent is a good agent, but they don't get to even see enough truth to share the truth that the American public wants from them. They're blocking Pam Bondi, Benny.
I mean,
Pam Bondi.
You want to talk about a mask-off moment?
I mean,
it's not only that; it's an insult. So they gave her. People don't understand. They gave Pam Bondi a redacted version of something that was already public, which was his address book. So it's like spitting in their face. Yeah, they're like spitting in her face.
It's an insult to the sitting elected, duly, rightfully elected president of the United States. The total absolute disregard that Wall Street and the financial sector with sexual immorality has to our government, and the spit in the face of the American citizen, duly elected by the people for the people. They laugh at that, Benny. They run what people call deep state cabal. It's a para-government, and it's international. It is absolutely embedded in the World Economic Forum. It is embedded in international trade. It has as much to do as the debacle in the Ukraine and hiding money. Maybe just remind ourselves that our president was indicted on making a phone call to look into corruption, calling the belly dancing fake president of the Ukraine, because he said it seems like there's corruption between the United States and the Ukraine. He was right. For decades, we're laundering money, but we're doing it on the backs of human beings, and they're using sex as Satan did. The Roman Empire fell because of sexual perversion and immorality. The Mayans fell, the Greeks fell. Heck, the Chinese has outlawed pornography. Sex is a wonderful weapon in the hands of darkness to compromise people. When you combine it with money, you control governments.
We said all day yesterday that this is actually a battle between light and darkness. Jaco, based on your experience, can you speak to that? Speak to the greater overall spiritual warfare at place and the version of treatment of children as the scriptures lay it out. And it's, as a father and a young father, it's such a charge that I have every time I read the Gospels to hear Christ talk about the hell that awaits people who harm children. I, of course, believe that, obviously, it is a great motivator, obviously, to be a good father and a protector, and to focus on protection of my daughters and sons. But this is obviously, if Christ is speaking out about it and doing it multiple times, this is obviously the way that the entire spiritual universe is knit together through the eyes of children. Can you please expound on that, since you are the expert?
Benny, the greatest war Satan can wage against God. Because remember, and again, my respect for you, brother. I remember a day when I stood on a Turning Point stage with you, and we did a fake rugby tackle together. I don't know if you remember, but it is you are doing such great work as a man of God, leading your family. Let me explain this. Satan is kicked out of heaven with a third of the angels. You understand that today, even when Benny Johnson makes a mistake, God says, my mercy and grace is new for you, Benny, tomorrow, but not for Lucifer. He can never return to the kingdom of God. He hates God's children. He despises the fact that Jesus said, if you train a child in my ways when they're young, they will not depart from me when they're old, which means they have an opportunity to sit in the high throne room with the King of Kings, and Satan cannot. It is all about the children. It's why they cut body parts off of children. It's why from the early days they went after children with Kinsey. The battle is a spiritual battle because Jesus said, rather you put a millstone around your neck and throw yourself in the ocean, which is about 150-pound setter block, a chain, and suicide, than to lead one of these astray. He didn't say rape. He didn't say sell. He said lead them astray. Later in Scripture, he stopped speaking to the adults because he knows the adults are going to fail the children. And he speaks to the children directly and said, do not be led astray. But I want to take your audience to a deeper place, deep water. What if this is true, and I hold it to be true, that some men and women got on a boat called the Mayflower, and I'm an immigrant, and I bleed red, white, and blue. I love this country because I had to swear to defend this country, to break the allegiance with my previous country. What if the men and women actually got on a boat to abolish slavery? What if those men and women, the founding fathers that signed the Constitution, could wake up today? They would be appalled. They would say, what do you mean you've retreated? What do you mean you have more slaves in America today than ever before in history, sex slaves? What do you mean you've abandoned children? What do you mean children are being sold with the #1 nation selling children? They would be referencing Ezekiel 33:7. And in Ezekiel 33:7, God says, the watchman on the wall has to warn of the injustice, or the blood is on the hands of the watchman. We've got blood on our hands in this country because of people like the FBI, deep state, the cabal, the para-government that allows children, the future, that flag behind you is not America. It's a symbol of America. What is America? The people that holds these truths to be self-evident, that says this Constitution is written off of the Word of God. Charlie Kirk does an amazing job to say the most cited document in the Constitution is the Bible. They understood that if not for a moral people, this Constitution doesn't work. You and I have a responsibility. Our freedom as citizens, we will stand account for our citizenship and what we did with it in front of Jesus one day. Your wife won't stand with you, but he will ask you, Benny, what did you do with children? What did you do with the stewardship as a father? What did you do, Benny, with all the knowledge you get? And I can stand here as a son of God saying, Benny Johnson is speaking truth. Benny Johnson is a watchman on the wall that's warning of the injustice, but will they listen? I bet you the Attorney General of the United States today is asking the same question. How can it be? She only answers to the president, to the executive branch. How can it be that there is a system that will not warn of the injustice, that will look the other way? You asked earlier, what are some of the crimes? Racketeering, aiding and abetting, complicit nature, hiding of evidence, tax fraud, money laundering. Rack it up. They're going to make her life very difficult. This is biblical, Benny. If we get this wrong as a nation, I don't know that the grace God gave us on November 5th, and it's the grace of God that turned the cheek of a man while he was talking about women and children being illegally brought and smuggled into a country and being abused, by the way. While he's talking about a chart of cartels raping women and children, God turns his cheek. He gets marked on his ear, which is biblical. Go read the Old Testament, like King Cyrus. God sets him apart, sets him on a hill. God gave us grace and mercy to get it right. If we don't get it right, Benny, when it comes to children, I have high concern for the wrath of God on this nation.
Wow. I mean, think about that, you guys. Everything that this guy is breaking down is not only biblical, but it just makes sense. It makes too much sense. But let me know what you guys think about this in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you on the next one. I'm out.